Hi everyone, my name is Debo and welcome to the very first edition of DEBO'S Den for 2022. In this first edition, we're actually going to be talking about predictions based on market research that I'm sharing and I intend to actually come back to later in the year. There are three sets of predictions. So the first set of predictions are actually going to be around fundraising and things related to fundraising. The second set of predictions that I'm going to make will be personality-based predictions. I'm actually going to talk about some people like Jack Dorsey, former CEO of Twitter, as well as Warren Buffett. And I'll come back to that. And the third set of predictions are actually going to be around regulatory issues and issues around regulations and operations of fundraising in Africa. So please stay with me and we'll be right back. So, welcome back. As I said, the very first set of predictions are what we call funding related predictions. Prediction 1 is on the amount of funding that will take place in Africa in 2022. Now, let's take a back step. In 2020, Get Funded Africa releases what we call the Africa Startup Ecosystem Funding Report. And basically, we have released the one for 2020 where funding in Africa reached at that time a peak of $2 billion in 2020. In 2021, our reports indicate that because of the growth rates and the amount of investment that is actually pouring into Africa from angel investors, from venture capital firms, as well as investments from the IFC, which stands for the International Finance Corporation. The IFC is the sister or private sector arm of the World Bank, as well as other multilateral organizations such as the AFDB or the Africa Development Bank. So with the combination of these funds from, I would say, angel investors, from venture capital firms, and multilateral organizations, I believe, the research indicates that investment into African startups will hit a high of $10 billion. And now this leads me to what I'll call the second prediction, still under funding set of the funding related rounds. This is actually about the rise of investment syndicates. Now, you may not have heard of it, or maybe you have, but let me just describe investment syndicates generally speaking. So, investment syndicates is where several investors actually come together, usually under what we'll call a lead syndicate, meaning that a lead person or lead organization that plans to invest in an organization and then it calls together a few people that may be interested in co-investing with that lead organizer or lead syndicate. So hence the term syndicate rounds. Now in Africa, we've actually had a problem with funding for startups in the pre-seed round and in the seed round, and even up to, to some extent, depending on the size, Series A. Now, if you do not know what seed round, pre-seed round, or Series A is, I would suggest that you take one of the courses developed by Get Funded Africa, where all the fundraising terms have been broken down and well explained. This course is very, very useful for beginners or for founders, or even people who want to start their own business, or people who want to raise funds from investors. That was a shameless plug, but it's okay. Now, really, if you can, make sure you get this course. The link is written on your screen right now. So I'll come back to syndicates. So basically, these syndicates invest in pre-series seed round, in seed round, and even up to Series A. And this has been missing on the continent. But more and more, you have many angel investors who are willing to put down relatively small amounts, $1,000, $5,000, $10,000, $50,000 or more, and they usually don't have the time to do all the due diligence required in investing in a particular startup. But some people are able to literally do that groundwork, and then syndicates then kind of like put in their funds. So I believe that 2022 is a year where we're actually going to see the rise of more investment syndicates who would actually even increase the investment into Africa. So our analysts expect that this will actually contribute a significant portion of the funds that are actually going to be invested in African startups. Hence, our prediction of a $10 billion investment in African startups. Forget Funded Africa. We are enablers of the African startup ecosystem. And so fundraising is part of the things that we enable. And so watch out for some of the things that we're going to be announcing around investment syndicates in 2022. And prediction number 3 on the funding-based set of predictions is the rise of investment in healthcare companies. Healthcare companies for a long time in Africa have been treated like orphans. There are many companies using technology in the healthcare sector, and many of them have had to rely largely on government contracts to even survive. However, there's a revolution that is taking place. This revolution started, give or take, about 3-4 years ago, and it will continue to accelerate. So basically, as I said, prediction 3 on the fundraising set of predictions is the rise of health technology companies, or health tech. Let me say this. We're living in very, very difficult times, particularly on the healthcare side of things. We're seeing a once in a generation event taking place where a particular infection has taken hold, not just in one country or in one region, but across the world. And so what this means is that there's a lot of attention now being paid to health related companies, particularly on the technology side. So which is why I said health tech. And so these health tech companies I see, especially the ones that GFA have been working with in terms of fundraising and even getting to understand that industry, these companies have shown a lot of growth, and by extension a lot of funding is being poured into African startups in the technology space. So we believe that 2022 is actually going to usher in an increased level of investment in health tech companies. So I just spoke about the increased level in health tech companies. Another industry that is going to receive a lot of funding as a consequence of the effects of the health challenges around the world is actually the education sector, which is surprising. But if you think about it, not really, really surprising. Here's the thing. With the COVID restrictions in different parts of the world, particularly in Africa, what this has meant is that a lot of people have been able to actually transition to learning remotely. Now, learning remotely has boomed in other parts of the continent, and even in other continents as well, in Europe, in North America, in Asia, and even right here in Africa. On Get Funded Africa's media page, and you will see the link at the bottom of the screen, media.getfundedafrica.com, there's a lot of investments that we have reported around investment in the educational sector. And these investment sizes have actually risen to the point that very recently a startup related to education, one of them called Edukoya, was able to raise a seed round. Now, not Series A, not Series B, a seed round of $3.6 million. You heard me right? An edtech company raised a seed round of $3.6 million. And so we see that this is actually going to continue to happen. That with remote learning, more and more companies and more African startups in the educational technology space will actually begin blossoming even more and raise record amounts in the education technology space. And prediction 5, under what I call fundraising set of predictions, is the rise of African unicorns. Today, we have 6 companies that are what we call African unicorns. Now, as always, I like to explain these things. A unicorn is a company that has received investment and the company is valued at over $1 billion. So there are currently 6 African unicorns, and you will see rolling across the screen all 6 of these companies in Africa today. Now, we believe that the number of African unicorns, or there's a phrase that has been used to describe them, soonicorns, would actually increase in 2022. With the record levels of investments that we expect to see on the African continent and the huge interest from investors in the African, we expect that some of these soonicorns will be unicorns and the number of unicorns likely triple in 2022. So we're expecting that the number of African unicorns will move from 6 of them as at the end of 2021 to 18 in 2022. So this now moves us to the second set of predictions, which we have termed personality or celebrity-based predictions in 2022 around fundraising. This is very interesting. Some of it might be controversial, some of it might be interesting, and some of it we just don't know, but we think so. So here are the predictions related to celebrities or personalities in the funding space. So prediction 1 is that Jack Dorsey is going to move to Nigeria. Yes, Jack Dorsey, the former CEO of Twitter, who stepped down as the CEO last year and is very, very crypto savvy and very interested in crypto, is going to move to Nigeria. Why do we say that? Okay, now pause. Let's take a step back. Now, Jack Dorsey is the CEO of Twitter. And in addition to being the CEO of Twitter, Jack Dorsey is very, very, very interested in blockchain and cryptocurrencies. He's one of the biggest, probably one of the biggest proponents of crypto before now. Now, note something. A few years ago, just before COVID hit, Jack Dorsey actually said that he's going to spend half of his time in the US, where he is based, and half of his time on the African continent, so in Africa. Now, this was a bit controversial at the time because some people were like, why do you want to spend half of your time on the African continent? And where on the African continent will Jack Dorsey actually move to? Now, this point became moot, but why did that happen? COVID. So basically, with the COVID restrictions, that goal or that statement that Jack Dorsey made didn't hold. But before I even continue with this prediction, listen to what Jack Dorsey said.
Are split on that. Those who cover Square see it as a huge opportunity. They say Africa represents the future of payments, and the move is really seen as forward-looking by Dorsey. The company does not operate in any African countries right now, and the continent is still mostly cash-based. So that means the expansion of Square's credit card hardware and possibly its payments app. This also fits with Square's mission of financial inclusion. And Dorsey mentions Bitcoin in the tweet. Square already offers crypto trading on its app, and Jack has personally advocated for that. Analysts see more adoption for crypto in emerging markets as well. But Square analysts still say Dorsey may need to appoint an interim CEO or a COO at the very least. Different story, though, for Twitter investors. It's an election year, so social media companies will likely face scrutiny for their ad models and roles in influencing politics. They say Dorsey's absence could become a concern, and any challenges that he does face could be compounded if he's 9 time zones away. Both companies declined to comment, guys.
Kate, can you quantify the market opportunity in Africa? Because I know when this story came out, it really raised a lot of eyebrows. Why is Jack Dorsey going to Africa versus a country like China and India, where we're slowly trying to understand the market opportunity in those emerging market nations? But I would also point out a lot of venture capital money is starting to go towards the continent. Just last week, you had OPay, which is the biggest digital payments company in Africa, raise money from SoftBank. Visa, another company, just putting about $300 million to work in Lagos.
Absolutely. So you see analysts on Square say that this is the next frontier for Square. They also mention India and other emerging markets, but Africa is seen as potentially the next step for Square, and they do not operate in any countries there right now. On the crypto side, we haven't seen that much adoption in Bitcoin in the U.S., but in a country in Africa, there could be more viability for somebody to actually need Bitcoin or some sort of cryptocurrency for your day-to-day payments that we haven't seen pick up here. Jack has been an advocate of Bitcoin, said that he sees it as the digital currency of the internet. So on that side, I think that it really is an opportunity. Square analysts are bullish. Twitter, obviously, different story, not the case there.
Yeah, and unlike the Fed, the Nigeria Central Bank is actually open to digital currencies. They endorse it, which is quite...
So the second prediction under, as I said, our celebrity-based prediction set is going to be around Warren Buffett. Now, some of you may know that Warren Buffett used to be the richest man in the world. He's no longer the richest, but he's one of the wealthiest. And Warren Buffett has invested in companies and countries around the world. So from investment in Coca-Cola to investment in Apple and so many companies. Warren Buffett owns an investment company called Berkshire Hathaway, which has hundreds, if not thousands of companies that they have invested in over the last, 50, 60 years. Now, why do I mention Warren Buffett? Because of the increase in investments and the opportunities, as I just mentioned, both the unicorns and the soonicorns, we believe that in 2022, there's a high likelihood that Warren Buffett will have his first investment in Africa. So Berkshire Hathaway, if someone in your organization is listening, please, when you invest in Africa, make sure to contact Get Funded Africa that our prediction actually came true. We'll be waiting. And now the third prediction that I have under the celebrity-based set of predictions is centered around somebody you all probably know. Yes, I'm talking about Amazon's founder, Jeff Bezos. Now, Jeff Bezos has an investment vehicle called Bezos Expeditions. Jeff Bezos actually invested in Africa for the first time in 2021, where his Bezos Expeditions invested in one of the big African startups called Cheaper Cash. Now, Cheaper Cash got investment from Bezos Expeditions, and we believe that Jeff Bezos's Bezos Expeditions, or one of its entities, is going to close more funding rounds on the African continent. And it's pretty simple. Jeff Bezos, founder of Amazon, founder of Blue Origin, as you know, there's a space race going on as well, and founder of several other organizations and an investor, is actually going to be more active on the African funding space. So what company, what industry is their organization going to invest in? Well, we'll see. And remember, as I said earlier, follow our page, media.getfundedafrica.com. Yes, you can see it scrolling down below. Follow the page and let's see if this prediction is going to come true. Now, this is section 3. And in this set of predictions, it will be predictions related to regulatory issues in the funding landscape in Africa, as well as operational issues as well, from an operational point of view. So let's go in it very, very quickly. Number 1 is related to startup bills. Now, what is happening, or what has happened, is that in most of the countries in North America and in Europe as well, there's been a lot of structure around startups. In the US, they had what they called the Jobs Act, which essentially was around how startups can get funded. And so what is happening is that there's a gradual transition across Africa of startup bills. Here's why. There are 3 countries in Africa that have set up or launched and completed their startup bills process. You can see all 3 countries scrolling on your screen. Here's the thing. These countries, after passing their startup bills, have seen a corresponding increase in the amount of investment that is coming into them. Now, it doesn't mean that they are the top investment destinations, but vis-a-vis the investments that have occurred in those countries versus the investment that they had prior to the dates of passing their startup bills, there's actually a jump. And this is according to the research team in Get Funded Africa. So basically, with these startup bills, we believe that many other African countries are actually going to move forward in passing startup bills. And this is going to be across Africa. Now, whether these startup bills will lead to direct increases in the countries that, set up the bills or of legislation remains something to be seen. I know for a fact that probably the top economies in Africa, particularly in Nigeria and South Africa, there is progress on their various startup bills. Let's talk about Nigeria very briefly. As at the time of shooting this video, the startup bill has been sent to through the legislature and has reached the executive. And so we shall see if this will be passed in 2022 in Nigeria, and then the effect of passage of that bill. In South Africa as well, momentum is going around, especially around private sector and public sector collaboration in passing the startup bills. Now, once again, will these lead to increased investment in the startup ecosystem in these countries? I think time will tell. And this is one of those areas where we're going to do a recap later in the year. Now, our second prediction around regulatory and operational issues is related to working from home. Now, I mentioned earlier in one of the predictions and one of the other sections that working from home is something that we've had to do. Literally, most people have had to work from home at one point or the other over the course of the last 2 years. Now, we think that working from home is literally going to become a trend, especially because of the demand in certain skilled areas. Let me explain what I mean. You have, for example, engineers who have been developing, and working prior to COVID physically, and then have started working remotely. But by working remotely,
they tend to be able to work on multiple projects or even in multiple companies and in multiple countries. So by extension, it means that this trend of working from home, especially for highly skilled employees, is a trend that is going to continue and will affect startups and fundraising of African startups in 2022. And the third and final prediction related to the section of operational issues is about artificial intelligence. Now, I believe some of you, may have heard about Web 3.0 or third wave of the web. This is more like a buzz phrase that is going on out there, related to the evolution of the internet, let's say, and how more and more people can actually own their own personal data or move away from centralization of data into a more decentralized state in terms of data ownership. Today, the web is controlled by some very massive companies, Google, social media, TikTok, Facebook, etc., seem to have a lot of presence on the web as it is today. And Web 3 or Web 3.0, as some would say, is really more about how the internet becomes decentralized. Some people say it's just some buzzwords and all that. But the prediction that we have is more around artificial intelligence and how it's going to be used in developing more African startups. We think that Africa has had a dearth of data over a long period of time. And many startups, by doing what they're doing, are actually solving problems and by extension, generating data. This tons and tons and tons of data that is being generated in Africa for the very first time is going to require a lot of computing power or a lot of AI, artificial intelligence, machine learning, choose your word. And so we expect that data analytics, data visualization, artificial intelligence is a trend that is going to impact African startups in 2022. These are predictions from the entire Get Funded Africa Market Intelligence team for 2022. Let's see how well we do. Obviously, we're going to revisit some of these predictions over the coming months and even at the end of the year to see what happened and what didn't happen. We're not soothsayers. We don't know the future, really. We're just using data from the past and looking around the environment to predict what is going to happen in the future. Some will come true, and let's be realistic, some will not come true. But it will be interesting to see the evolution and how things are working and the growth in the African startups ecosystem. I should say this is going to be produced and put out there for free. DEBO'S Den is actually out there, and it'll be on our YouTube page, Get Funded Africa's YouTube page, as well as on Get Funded Africa's media website. I've mentioned it several times, so if you don't know it, look at it scrolling down there again, media.getfundedafrica.com. So on our YouTube page, when you're there, in order to get all the weekly episodes of DEBO'S Den, don't forget to subscribe, as you can see in the icon, and click the bell button as well. It's very important that you do that, so you'll be notified whenever we release the next edition of DEBO'S Den. So we're so happy that you've joined and started the year with us and that you're watching this video, and hope to see you in the very next edition of DEBO'S Den.